These aircraft, serving with the Air National Guard in April 1971, were among the last ones of their kind in U.S. service.
8 months later, the final F-84s were retired and sent to the scrapyard. By then, most Thunderjets were long gone. Only this version, the RF-84 Thunderflash reconnaissance plane, remained in significant numbers due to its specialized operational value. By 1971, the fleet was clearly aging. Many were grounded from structural fatigue, while those still flying required constant inspections and intensive maintenance. The last RF variant had been produced in 1957 and had endured a busy operational life. The Thunderflash photographic aircraft represented the most advanced evolution of the F-84 family, embodying all the design improvements made since the project began in October 1944. At that point, Republic's design team had moved away from adapting a jet engine to the rugged P-47 Thunderbolt and started fresh to create an entirely new aircraft. The United States faced the emergence of advanced German and British jet aircraft. Over the following years, the U.S. Army launched an urgent effort to close the gap. Bell and Lockheed developed the first American jet aircraft, with the Lockheed P-80 entering production. Meanwhile, Republic devised a sleek, streamlined design centered around General Electric's new axial flow engine. The result was remarkable, prompting the Army to authorize construction of 3 prototype planes designated the XP-84. The first prototype was finished in December 1945 and transported to the Muroc Testing Center for evaluation. On February 28, 1946, the aircraft made its first flight, becoming America's first post-war fighter. Its design was relatively conventional, featuring straight wings with a laminar flow profile. The aircraft featured an all-metal construction with low-mounted wings on the fuselage. Beneath the teardrop canopy, the cockpit was pressurized and equipped with an ejector seat. Although not groundbreaking technologically, it had classic lines and incorporated many proven concepts of its time. Production progressed quickly in relatively small batches until the E model was introduced in 1949. With over 840 units built, ongoing design refinements led to many improvements being retrofitted to earlier versions. For instance, this E model has been updated with several advancements developed for later variants. From the outset, the plane faced challenges, largely the same issues common to other early jet aircraft. The issues reflected a lack of understanding about the requirements and potential of the new jet power plants. Over time, the aircraft evolved significantly, eventually bearing little resemblance to the sleek 1946 prototype. The most glaring design flaw was its straight wing, prompting approval to develop a swept-wing version. Another major issue was beyond the designer's control. The Thunderjet was severely underpowered. Like all early jets, it suffered from low thrust and required long runways for takeoff. When fully loaded, rocket-assisted takeoff was often safer than risking the plane running out of runway. Unfortunately, many planes failed to lift off in time, and hundreds of Thunderjets were lost in such accidents worldwide. Even the later swept-wing models needed assisted takeoff gear, as their more powerful engines were offset by their increased weight. Development proceeded slowly, so an improved straight-wing version was produced as a stopgap measure. The G model was produced in greater numbers than any other version, with 3,025 units built. Originally designed as an interceptor, the aircraft was armed with 6 machine guns, 4 in the nose and 2 in the wings. The Thunderjet had replaced the Lockheed P-80, which was developed 2 years earlier. However, due to the speed limitations of its straight-wing and underpowered engine, the F-84 was soon replaced as an interceptor by the North American F-86 Sabre. The rapid progression of models left the Army with various aircraft suited to different roles. In this division of tasks, the Thunderjet evolved into a fighter-bomber, and by the G model, it had gained the capability to deliver nuclear strikes. The Thunderjet earned its strong combat reputation in tactical support and air-to-ground strike missions. Its low-mounted wing facilitated this role by allowing easy loading of weapons with minimal equipment. Capable of carrying up to 4,000 pounds of bombs, the Thunderjet delivered powerful attacks. With rocket-assisted takeoff, it could operate from short, rugged frontline airstrips, while its sturdy construction allowed it to withstand small arms fire and remain airborne. Adding to its ground attack effectiveness were its 6 machine guns, each with a capacity of 300 rounds. The aircraft could carry up to 32 5-inch rockets under its wings and fuselage, a capability inspired by World War II tank-busting missions. Additionally, it could deliver a lethal payload of napalm, offering further versatility in strike missions. The straight-wing design limited the plane's top speed to Mach 0.82, effectively disqualifying it from air-to-air combat. At higher speeds, the aircraft became dangerously unstable, risking structural failure. Another drawback as a fighter was its limited maneuverability. However, this lack of agility proved advantageous in ground attack roles, as the plane flew with exceptional stability, serving as a reliable platform for strikes. The speed limitation was also irrelevant for ground operations, where precision and endurance mattered more than velocity. Despite its notoriously difficult takeoff characteristics, the Thunderjet excelled in tactical missions. The initial production version, the B model, was a rudimentary aircraft offering little advancement over 1945 piston-engine fighters. However, as successful models and subvariants were developed, the aircraft's sophistication increased significantly. By the G model, it featured radar-assisted sighting, an autopilot, and updated electrical, fuel, and hydraulic systems, along with numerous other enhancements. Early jet engines were highly fuel inefficient, and the Thunderjet had limited internal fuel capacity. While wingtip tanks increased its range, the early models were still limited to about 1,200 miles. By the time the G model was introduced, its range had been extended to 2,000 miles, but a crucial modification was added. As it was used by the Strategic Air Command as an escort fighter, in-flight refueling capability was incorporated. Interestingly, the refueling receiver was placed in the left wing, which disrupted airflow across a significant portion of the wing surface. The G model had only been developed due to delays in the development of the swept-wing version. However, by 1952, the new model was ready for its first flight. Initially designated the F-96, the aircraft's designation was later reverted to the F-84F, and it was named the Thunderstreak. Once again, the aircraft's performance in its intended fighter role proved disappointing. The increased engine power and the improved aerodynamics were negated by the added weight of the plane, causing it to retain the sluggishness of earlier models, particularly in its reluctant takeoff performance. In terms of speed, the F model could reach 695 miles per hour, compared to the G model's 622. However, in terms of climb rate and ceiling, the new model was outperformed by the straight-wing versions. The F model followed its predecessors in being used as a tactical fighter bomber. Development of the swept-wing version was repeatedly delayed, primarily due to budgetary constraints. Congress kept tight control over funding, and the Air Force lacked the resources to push the project forward. The prototype of the swept-wing model first flew on June 3, 1950. It quickly became clear that a more powerful engine was required, but development stalled at that point. The project only regained momentum after a significant event provided the necessary push. Just 22 days after the first flight of the swept-wing model, news of a communist invasion of South Korea reached the United States. This event triggered a surge in defense spending that has continued with little interruption ever since.
Although many countries promptly disbanded their wartime armies, other countries continued to maintain forces so large that they posed a constant threat of aggression. And this year, the invasion of Korea has shown that there are some who will resort to outright war, contrary to the principles of the Charter, if it suits their end.
When the Korean War broke out, the United States Air Force was a mere shadow of the powerful force it had been just 5 years earlier. The South Korean Air Force was virtually non-existent, consisting of just 16 aircraft, all trainers or liaison planes, with a single gun or bomb rack among them. Airfields were few and basic, further limiting the South's capability. As a result, the initial burden fell on piston-engine aircraft to operate from Korea. American jets, based in Japan, were forced to travel to the battlefront with limited loitering time available. The air force the U.S. could deploy was barely sufficient for the task, and if the North Koreans had possessed a capable air force, the entire peninsula could have been swiftly overrun. In reality, the North had 62 light attack planes and 70 outdated fighters, which were quickly destroyed by the Americans. This allowed U.S. forces to slow and eventually halt the northern advance. Heavy bombers were used for a combination of interdiction and strategic raids, which significantly hindered the northern efforts. In conjunction with Navy aircraft and the few types the Air Force could effectively deploy from the limited airstrips in Korea, the United States achieved air supremacy and maintained it for much of the conflict. Given the initial weakness of the ground forces, it is clear that the victories in Korea in late 1950 were largely due to the American aircraft. The F-84s were not initially sent to Korea. P-51 Mustangs and P-80s were more than capable of handling the task. However, on November 9, 1950, the situation changed dramatically. The North Koreans began deploying jets. Within days, the United States was compelled to send more modern aircraft to the front. The Thunderjets available were the straight-wing D and E models, which were never a match for the MiGs. Still, the F-84s, though not fast enough to down the Russian jets, were agile enough to typically avoid direct confrontation. Less than a month after the MiG-15s appeared on December 6th, the first F-84 combat missions were launched. The aircraft were shipped to Japan, where salt corrosion damage was repaired, and along with the F-86 Sabres, were sent into battle. Outclassed as fighters by the two swept-wing jets, the F-84s found their niche in tactical air-to-ground operations. Most of the time, the F-84s needed Sabres as escorts, especially if there was a chance of encountering MiGs. The Russian jets were simply too fast for the Thunderjets to engage effectively. However, in their tactical role, the F-84s proved invaluable. By the end of the war, they had flown 86,408 sorties. During this period, they dropped 5,560 tons of napalm and 50,427 tons of bombs. They fired 22,154 rockets and an immense number of machine gun rounds. The infantry, a mix of admiration and gratitude, came to dub them the champ of the fighter bombers. Nine MiGs were officially credited as shot down by Thunderjets, and another 96 were either likely destroyed or certainly damaged. In comparison, the MiGs shot down 18 Thunderjets and damaged many more. However, it was anti-aircraft fire that took the greatest toll on the F-84s. A total of 135 Thunderjets were shot down by ground forces. Though some missions were flown from Japan, relying on in-flight refueling, the Thunderjets were tough enough and had enough ground clearance to operate from Korea's rugged airstrips. This often involved using assisted takeoffs with rocket packs jettisoned for later retrieval and reuse. The situation was far from ideal, as the rocket smoke was so thick in squadron formation that only the lead aircraft could see clearly, while the following planes had to rely on instruments to take off. The routines of briefing, preparation, takeoff, and attack became second nature. The F-84s shouldered a heavy burden, not only providing ground support at the front lines, but also interdicting supplies, attacking reinforcements, and destroying bridges, railways, and power stations. In the latter task, they even operated as a strategic force, reflecting how they had earned a reputation for being reliable, rugged, and deadly. They had proven themselves as a primary weapon in the Air Force's arsenal. The Thunderjet's greatest strengths were emphasized in Korea. They were, especially in comparison to other early jets, easy to maintain. They were also stable and effective platforms for attack, capable of withstanding significant damage. Their performance, though unremarkable, when compared to newer designs, was solid, especially when considered alongside their Republic relatives, such as the P-47 from World War II and the influential F-105s of the Vietnam War. Despite their shortcomings, the Thunderjet emerged as the most effective jet attack plane in the Air Force during the Korean conflict. It began to step out from the shadow of its flaws, revealing itself as an important and successful aircraft. Its significance should be understood within the context of its time. Many early jets were far less capable and successful than the F-84. Their contribution to the Korean War could be described as admirable. But the reason the Thunderjets were entrusted with the grueling, repetitive, and perilous tasks of the conflict is simple. They were reliable when other aircraft types failed in combat. While the Thunderjets had their drawbacks and limitations, they also earned some of the most unflattering nicknames ever given to U.S. aircraft, such as Groundhog, a reference to their sluggish takeoff. As time went on, however, crews grew to appreciate the plane's strengths, and the nickname was shortened to Hog, which, though still not entirely flattering, became more affectionate. Many of the lessons learned during the Second World War were considered outdated after the advent of the atomic bomb. The Thunderjets' role in the Korean War coincided with a shifting global political landscape, where the concept of limited war began to take shape in response to the advent of nuclear weapons and the ensuing threat of mutually assured destruction. The Thunderjets, though initially seen as outdated, proved themselves to be highly effective in this new form of warfare, particularly in tactical air support and ground attack missions. By the end of the Korean War, the world had been irrevocably altered. The cessation of the occupation of West Germany in 1954 marked a new chapter in international relations, with former adversaries, like the Germans, being reintegrated into the global community. The handover of the F-84F Thunderstreaks to the German Luftwaffe in 1956 symbolized a broader shift, where the Thunderjets, now in their updated form, played a role not only in the legacy of the United States, but also in the rebuilding and rearming of nations once at odds. This marked the beginning of a new era, where former enemies collaborated for mutual defense, and the Thunderjets, now part of a larger European defense framework, continue to serve the reshaped post-war world order. The Thunderstreak's widespread deployment by NATO countries underscored the enduring value of the F-84 design, even as newer, more advanced aircraft began to enter service. The Germans, in particular, became the largest foreign user of the Thunderstreak, operating 5 full wings, while other NATO allies like France, Belgium, Portugal, Turkey, and Italy also utilized the F-84 for their defense. These aircraft served as the frontline defense in Europe during a time when tensions between East and West were at their peak, making their contribution to regional security immeasurable. The Turkish Air Force, for example, operated Thunderstreaks until 1982, a testament to the longevity of the platform. Despite their limitations, particularly in speed and maneuverability, the F-84s were seen as reliable workhorses in tactical and ground support roles. Their phased-out replacement came as newer aircraft with enhanced capabilities were developed, but for decades, the F-84 was one of the best available options for NATO forces. Another notable variant of the F-84 was the RF-84F, known as the Thunderflash. The need for a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft was highlighted by the Korean War, where speed and the ability to avoid interception by MiGs were crucial. Designed to meet the need for higher speed and greater range than the planes previously used for the role. Based on the second swept-wing prototype of the F-84, which featured a closed pointed nose and wing intakes, designs not incorporated into the fighter version, the Thunderflash underwent significant changes for its intended mission. The blunter nose design allowed for the accommodation of 6 cameras, an essential feature for aerial reconnaissance. The RF-84F prototype first flew in February of 1952, and after successful testing, it went into production, with 718 units constructed. Production was delayed due to engine difficulties, but eventually ramped up, and the aircraft entered operational service. The U.S. Air Force deployed 11 squadrons of Thunderflashes, and they served for 17 years, providing essential photographic reconnaissance during that time. Additionally, 327 units were supplied to allied nations through U.S. military assistance programs. Though the RF-84F was originally intended as a stopgap measure, it served its purpose effectively. However, after just 3 years of frontline service with the U.S. Air Force, it was replaced by the McDonnell RF-101 Voodoo, which offered greater performance for the reconnaissance mission. Despite this relatively short period in active service, the Thunderflash played a crucial role in the evolution of high-speed reconnaissance aircraft during the Cold War. The long service life of the RF-84F Thunderflash with the National Guard is a testament to how well the Republic team had designed it for the photo reconnaissance task. The aircraft's ease of maintenance and ground operation access were vital to its sustained effectiveness, and these features had a lasting impact on future aircraft designs. The F-84 family, including the Thunderflash, was known for its simplified servicing requirements, a result of meticulous design work. This included features such as over 180 access panels and the ability to remove the entire tail section to simplify engine maintenance, all contributing to the aircraft's operational viability. The Thunderjets also marked a significant milestone in the history of the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds, the Air Force's elite aerial demonstration team. While it's unclear whether the team's name was directly inspired by the aircraft, it is known that the F-84 was the first plane used by the Thunderbirds when the team was formed in 1953. This further cemented the Thunderjet's place in aviation history, not just as a combat aircraft, but also as a symbol of American air superiority during the early Cold War years. The F-84G Thunderjets were indeed a significant part of the Thunderbird's early years, with the team flying them for 2 years before transitioning to the swept-wing F-84F for the 1955 season. The tight formation flying required with these aircraft, which had a wingspan of only 5 feet apart, was highly risky, especially given the early jet's limited maneuverability. Despite the dangers, the Thunderbirds successfully performed 91 shows with the F-84F, ending with the Armed Forces Day show in 1956, before upgrading to the supersonic F-100 Super Sabre. The FICON, or Fighter Conveyor Project, was one such notable initiative. The FICON program sought to address the need for aerial surveillance during the Cold War by using the F-84 as a fighter conveyor. The idea was to modify the F-84 to carry a small reconnaissance drone or other payloads beneath its fuselage, effectively transforming it into a dual-role platform. This project highlighted the versatility of the F-84 series and its ability to adapt to evolving military needs during the early years of the Cold War. These innovations not only contributed to the F-84's success in service, but also provided valuable lessons in the development of future aircraft designs. The FICON Fighter Conveyor program was an innovative solution to the problem of performing reconnaissance missions over hostile territory with a fighter aircraft that had limited range and endurance. The concept was to use a large bomber, like the B-36, as a mothership to carry the reconnaissance fighter close to the target area. The fighter would be launched mid-flight, conduct the reconnaissance mission, and then be retrieved back by the bomber. This concept was simple in theory but required significant engineering and operational challenges to implement. The first tests with the modified F-84E in 1952 revealed a range of problems, including instability in the cradle used to hold the fighter on the bomber and issues with the fighter's hydraulic grapple system that was meant to secure it for retrieval. The stability of the fighter when attached to the bomber was especially challenging, as the fighter would often struggle with aerodynamic turbulence, especially in low-speed ranges when the aircraft was buffeted by the B-36 slipstream. Despite these difficulties, continuous refinements to the systems improved the reliability of the operation. Eventually, the FICON system demonstrated that it was possible for a fighter to be deployed from and recovered by a large bomber in flight. However, it remained a highly dangerous and complex operation that was never widely used in combat. The RF-84F was modified and redesignated as the RF-84K for operational deployment. Testing began in 1953, and by March 30th, the prototype successfully docked for the first time, resolving initial issues with the docking mechanisms. Modifications included a redesign of the horizontal tail and the addition of hydraulic latches to allow the plane to be stored in the B-36's bomb bay. After testing, the 91st Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron received 25 RF-84Ks, working alongside modified B-36s. The program ended in 1956, coinciding with the introduction of the U-2 reconnaissance aircraft. After the Soviets developed atomic weapons and delivery systems, one of the planners' main concerns was that airfields could be completely destroyed along with all their aircraft in a single strike. This and other factors, such as jets' need for long straight concrete runways, led to the creation of the Zero-Length Launch, or ZEL system. The idea was to launch manned, nuclear-armed aircraft from trucks or concrete bunkers, with hundreds of aircraft hidden in forests and other locations around the Soviet bloc's borders. These planes could be ready to respond immediately to a Soviet attack. Another version aimed to launch interceptors from similar setups to counter Soviet bombers. Martin Company tested the system using unmanned F-84G aircraft, which showed promising results. The first launch took place on December 15, 1953, and involved rapidly accelerating the F-84 from the truck before allowing it to land back on Earth. More tests followed. The Zero-Length Launch System used powerful solid fuel rocket boosters attached directly to the aircraft. Once the rocket fuel was depleted, the booster had to be discarded quickly as it became a drag on the aircraft. Tests show that by the time the rocket burned out, the aircraft reached 175 miles per hour, above stall speed, allowing the jet engine to take over. The first two unmanned trials showed results so close to expectations that the project moved forward to the third trial with a piloted plane on January 5, 1954. The recorded acceleration was 3.5 Gs, slightly higher than a Navy catapult launch. The pilot easily took control, and the test was deemed successful. The project continued until 1959, with tests using modified F-100 Super Sabres, and 148 orders were placed. Interestingly, the Soviets conducted similar experiments with MiG-19s. The project was eventually abandoned due to the development of more reliable missile systems. The F-84 continued to inspire a wide range of experimental variants, including the unusual F-84H model, designed as a supersonic propeller-driven aircraft. Initially designated as the F-106, this model had little in common with other F-84s and was later redesignated the F-84H. Two prototypes were ordered for potential Navy carrier use. The aircraft featured a turboprop, and various propellers were studied during development. Its first flight took place on July 22, 1955, and went smoothly. However, the aircraft failed to meet expectations and didn't exceed Mach 1, reaching only 670 miles per hour. While it became the world's fastest propeller-driven aircraft, it was ultimately unsuitable for the Navy's needs. A key limitation of propeller-driven aircraft had already been recognized. At speeds nearing Mach 1, and especially when passing through it, parts of the propeller would simultaneously move at speeds both above and below the speed of sound. This created immense stresses on the propeller, requiring revolutionary advancements in design and construction to withstand the varying loads. As a test platform for this technology, the F-84H proved invaluable. Experiments demonstrated the durability of the three-bladed propeller and the reliability of the power plant and airframe. However, with the advent of steam catapults, angled decks, and aerial refueling, the Navy abandoned the project in favor of true jet aircraft. The U.S. Air Force continued the F-84H project as basic research for future development. In addition to being the world's fastest propeller-driven aircraft, the F-84H is also widely regarded as the noisiest aircraft ever built. The engine, a large Allison unit producing nearly 6,000 horsepower, was a minor contributor to the aircraft's noise. The true source of the deafening racket was the propeller. At high speeds, even during ground maneuvers, the propeller tips reached supersonic speeds, creating about 900 sonic booms per minute, which combined into a thunderous sound. The noise was so intense that ground crew involved in the testing experienced symptoms like malaise and nausea, even while wearing earplugs during taxiing runs and takeoffs. A squadron of these aircraft on a carrier deck preparing for takeoff would have severely impacted operational efficiency, leading to the sensible abandonment of the aircraft and its supersonic propellers. Perhaps the most remarkable derivative of the F-84 was the XF-91 Thunderceptor, a 1946 design that remains one of the most extraordinary experimental aircraft of its time. Equipped with 4 rocket chambers and a powerful jet engine, it became the first U.S. combat plane to break the speed of sound in level flight. The wings of the Thunderceptor were also capable of pivoting. The XF-91 Thunderceptor's innovative wing design, combined with full-strength slats, resulted in an unusually low stall speed, enabling in-flight maneuvers that were unique for its time. The wings tapered from the tip toward the fuselage, reversing the typical wingtip stall effect by turning dangerous pitch up into easily manageable pitch down. With its intended power plants, the aircraft was expected to reach Mach 2, but even with the available engines, it could achieve Mach 1.2. Despite being the most advanced design of its era, the project was not pursued due to cost. Republic's ambition extended to the Mach 3 XF-103, a delta-winged design using both turbojets and ramjets, and featuring an enclosed pilot's compartment with no canopy. An F-84 was used to test periscope systems for the XF-103 pilot, proving the system's viability. In the Air National Guard, the F-84 enjoyed a long, uneventful career, often overshadowed by its slow takeoff, but respected by its pilots. While it was relegated to second-line status with the U.S. Air Force, many other nations kept it as a frontline aircraft, relying on it due to budget constraints and its reliable performance. The F-84 passed into history largely unnoticed, but still marked an important chapter in aviation. The F-84's reputation was marred by development challenges and being underpowered, yet its contributions, especially during the Korean War, warrant a reassessment. As a pivotal aircraft in the transition from piston-engine planes to the more advanced Century Series jets, the F-84 played a key role in the era of aviation. While outclassed by the F-86, a later model built on lessons from the F-84, the Thunderjet had many virtues in a time when aircraft design faced significant uncertainty. Its limitations were overshadowed by military priorities, and despite its shortcomings, it marked a significant leap in jet aircraft development, demonstrating that even limited jets had rendered propellers obsolete. Propeller-driven aircraft were reliable but had reached their limits, pushing the transition to the less advanced and more unpredictable jet technology. The F-84, despite its flaws, proved to be the most reliable and rugged of its time, particularly during the Korean War. While the F-86 is remembered for its role in defeating the MiG-15, the F-84 excelled in operating from poor airstrips under harsh conditions, providing critical tactical support that helped resist Chinese intervention. The F-84 also served as a platform for numerous experimental developments that influenced aviation for years to come. Positioned between two iconic tactical fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolt and the F-105 Thunder Chief, the F-84 holds its own in comparison, marking a significant chapter in military aviation history. The Panther stands as the most advanced ground attack fighter of its time. By the end of that day, it will play a crucial role in saving an American army from annihilation, securing the future of American naval aviation. Hiroshima, 1945. The atomic bomb's devastating power ends an empire and propels the world into the nuclear era. The destruction brought by this new weapon shifts America's military focus entirely. Soon, the carriers that brought the war to Japan's doorstep return home. Yet, as they dock in American ports, the very vessels that had carried the fight are already being consigned to history. To many, in positions of authority, the advent of the nuclear bomb has rendered the aircraft carrier obsolete, much like the carrier had previously done to the battleship. But these are matters of little concern to the men returning home to a nation intent on enjoying a peaceful and secure future, purchased through 4 bloody years of hardship. In Europe, they face an uncertain future and begin the long climb from Armageddon. Japan, too, lies in ruin. In despair, the former Axis powers and the nations they victimized look to the United States for salvation. America's response is the $17 billion Marshall Plan. The failure of the Versailles Treaty following World War I is a potent lesson not lost on the leaders in Washington. In hopes of establishing political stability in Europe and Asia, aid flows overseas with the tab partially paid by funds saved from the drastic cuts in the nation's military. Secretary of State George C. Marshall.
This is certainly not the program of a country seeking to exercise domination or to influence unduly any foreign countries. The nations and political groups which have now declared their opposition to the program apparently wish to block for their own reasons the revival of Western Europe. Whether we like it or not, we find ourselves, our nation, in a world position of vast responsibility. We can act for our own good by acting for the world's good.
By 1946, a former ally has become the new adversary. the only nation that poses a serious challenge to American global hegemony. The Marshall Plan is seen as the key to averting Soviet communist encroachment beyond what are already considered the lost regions of Eastern Europe. In the face of massive defense cutbacks, one service emerges fairly unscathed: the Army Air Corps. By 1947, it becomes an independent branch of the armed services and takes on a title appropriate to its newfound stature. As the holder of the nuclear grail, the Air Force will receive a lion's share of new funding. It was, after all, the Air Force that brought Nazi Germany to its knees and delivered the nuclear blow to Japan, ending the war. Within a decade, this new branch will become the largest enterprise in the United States, with over $70 billion worth of assets.
The long-awaited unification of the armed services comes a step nearer as top-ranking officials agree on a plan.
The long-awaited unification of the armed services comes a step nearer as top-ranking officials agree on a plan. To cut costs, the armed forces are streamlined under the new Office of the Secretary of Defense. The Army and Air Force band together in support of the Truman administration plan. The Navy, led by Navy Secretary James Forrestal, is less than enthusiastic and voices vehement opposition. At the heart of the debate lies the downsizing of the carrier fleet and the transfer of much of its airborne capability to the Air Force. According to the other services, the age of the carrier is dead. These massive floating airstrips will be sitting ducks in the nuclear era. Sentiments such as these, along with the government's new frugality, bring about a halt to the construction of the Navy's newest carrier, the USS United States. Furious, the Naval High Command readies itself for a war of self-preservation. The Navy, intent on proving the critics wrong, is prepared to show just how well a carrier fleet will fare in the face of nuclear attack. At a distant atoll in the Pacific called Bikini Island, they prepare a derelict fleet for the ultimate test. The Navy brass, among them Secretary Forrestal, are escorted through the vessels moored in Bikini Bay. Ships that once sailed with the mightiest navy in the world are manned by livestock in this, their final mission. 7 miles offshore, hundreds of men, admirals and stewards alike, wait for the drop. The warhead itself is identical to the one that leveled Nagasaki. Most assume that the damage will be severe but not complete. At the center of the fleet is the aircraft carrier Saratoga, the grand old fighting lady of the Pacific. Within seconds, the entire naval fleet is demolished. The ships that remain afloat are covered in radioactive spray. The politicians controlling the budget, the conclusion is straightforward: one bomb, one bomber, and an entire fleet lost. Failing to recognize the carrier's potential for flexible response, the Navy inadvertently strengthens the Air Force's argument. Only hours after the blast, with her hull collapsed, the Saratoga sinks to the bottom. Funding becomes scarce, but at their Bethpage, Long Island plant, Grumman Aircraft presses on with its first jet-age project, a carrier-based plane intended to be the Navy's future ground attack aircraft. Initially designed as a 2-seat night fighter, the XF-9F-1 faces setbacks and stalls due to issues with its 4-engine layout. But in August of 1946, when Grumman formally presents a new single-engine design to the Navy, it marks the beginning of a production run that will continue for more than a decade. Like its Grumman predecessors, the XF-9F-2 quickly takes on the name of a big cat, But over time it becomes clear that the Panther, as it is called, carries much more than just a company nickname.
Maybe they wouldn't go quite as high nor quite as fast because they were built a little heavier. But it meant then when you got hit by anti-aircraft fire that they would take more punishment than other airplanes. That's the reputation they had anyway. Now, of course, in modern days now, Grumman has made some of the highest and fastest aircraft that there are in existence.
The Panther is just the latest in a line of stalwarts that included the Hellcat, the backbone of the American carrier force that crushed Japan. The Hellcat's legacy as a rugged ground attack weapon marks a path that later Grumman planes like the Panther will follow.
We lovingly called Grumman aircraft the Grumman Iron Works because their airplanes were so good. They had a few that weren't too great, but generally speaking, most of them you couldn't tear apart.
For most pilots, flying a Grumman plane from carrier to combat and back conjures up one word: survivability. In November of 1947, the F9F2 is rolled out of the Bethpage Plant test facility for its first flight. The plane's nose is engineered with sliding rails for easy access to its 4 20mm nose cannon. With a pressurized air-conditioned cockpit, ejection seat, radio direction finder, and quick-release bubble canopy, the Panther is truly state-of-the-art. From the beginning, the plane displays the great handling characteristics that will one day make it the aircraft of choice for the Navy's Blue Angel flying team.
You could pull 8-10 Gs, and the bird would still be ready to fly the next day. I don't think I ever saw a wrinkle in a Panther jet. If you pull too many Gs in the average airplane, the skin's going to wrinkle somewhere, but not in the Panther jet.
The Panther's top speed is about 530 miles an hour at 20,000 feet. But like many early American jets, finding the power plant to reach that speed is no easy task. After struggling with a 4-engine configuration and then an underpowered Westinghouse J-30, Grumman eventually looks across the Atlantic to the Rolls-Royce company's Nene turbojet. This engine, too, is based on the Nene, but the engineers are neither British nor American. They're Russians working on imported Nene engines, around which they'll soon build the Soviet Union's premier jet fighter of the early 1950s, the MiG-15. Soon, both MiG and Panther will become reacquainted in the skies over a distant Asian peninsula. The jet era poses many new challenges, and nowhere is this more true than in the realm of American naval aviation. Since new carriers aren't being constructed to accommodate modern aircraft, vintage vessels are refitted instead. Jet weights and landing speeds demand much sturdier carrier decks, so those still in service are strengthened and reinforced. By the late 1940s, Panthers are deployed across the fleet, a fleet whose survival is threatened more by domestic politics than by any external threat. In discussions within the Pentagon, the Air Force advocates for the complete elimination of all large carrier groups. Ironically, despite the upheaval of the era, Grumman's F9 has become the cornerstone of the most advanced seaborne air force the world has ever known. Far to the east, events are rapidly intensifying global tensions. soon to test the Panthers' capabilities. In June 1948, the Soviet Union blocks West Berlin from the rest of the free world. This leads to a year of heightened tension as an unyielding America refuses to let the isolated city fall under Soviet control. That same year, fear and paranoia grip the world when the Soviets unveil their new long-range bomber, the Tupolev Tu-4 Bull, unsettling the Western powers. By September 1949, America's nuclear monopoly ends.
America prepares to face attack on its cities and industrial centers under a combined civilian defense program. Any community is vulnerable to possible bombing, including the final threat of the devastating atom.
For the first time, the USSR not only possesses atomic weapons, but also the means to deliver them to every major American city. Panic spreads through the United States, sending the nation into turmoil. That same year, in China, Mao Zedong's revolutionary forces bring a quarter of the world's population under the Red Banner. As the external communist threat spirals out of control, the nation redirects its anger inward. The 1948 election is a brutal contest, with Truman facing accusations of being too lenient on communism. His opponent, Thomas Dewey, exploits these charges for all the political gain they can provide.
And what are we going to do about the communists here in our midst? Some people jeer at the problem, calling it a red herring. Some people get panicky about it. I don't belong to either of those groups. We must neither ignore the communists nor outlaw them. If we ignore them, we give them the cloak of immunity that they want. If we outlaw them, we give them the martyrdom that they want even more. We will, in the government we get next January, we will keep informed and we'll keep the American people informed where they are, who they are, and what they're up to. And if they or anybody else if they break our laws against treason, they'll get a traitor's treatment.
As fear of Soviet nuclear power intensifies, trust in traditional military priorities begins to waver. By 1949, the Air Force has effectively won the inter-service struggle, and despite the known vulnerability of the B-36 long-range bomber to interception, it receives significant funding. Amid protests from Secretary Forrestal and others, congressional leaders start discussing cuts to naval aviation as high as 60%. The prevailing belief is that the bomber's long-range atomic strike capability renders naval carrier task forces obsolete. Within months, the inter-service rivalry claims its first victim. James Forrestal, asked to resign as Secretary of Defense, burdened by depression and exhaustion, takes his own life just before what would have been his moment of vindication. On June 25, 1950, in the remote regions of Korea, Northern dictator Kim Il-sung launches his invasion to reunify the country by force. He has the tacit approval of both Moscow and Beijing. Recent statements from Washington outlining the regions America deems vital exclude South Korea, a tragic oversight. Leaders in both Russia and China do not expect the U.S. to intervene. The attack is brutal and unexpected. Within 2 days, Seoul falls as communist forces push southward. closely pursued by a rapidly disintegrating South Korean army. But America's response is swift and decisive. With UN approval, U.S. troops from the occupation forces in Japan are quickly sent to Korea, many still in transport planes dusted with coal from the Berlin airlift. Most anticipate an easy victory against a backward opponent. However, peacetime occupation duty in Japan has left the American forces unprepared, soft, inadequately trained, and suffering from severe equipment shortages. The first unit to engage in battle is codenamed Task Force Smith. It is a grandiose title for a single battalion of inexperienced enlistees. The enemy they face, however, is well equipped, highly motivated, and thoroughly trained. In the face of this onslaught, the beleaguered GIs desperately wait for air support that simply isn't available. Both South Korean and U.S. forces are pushed to the southern tip of the Korean peninsula, where they barely cling to the last piece of Korean soil, the Busan perimeter. Each day, the perimeter shrinks as North Korean forces, equipped with Soviet tanks, roll over the scattered American units. Due to recent defense budget cuts, most American troops are armed only with World War II-era bazookas, which prove entirely ineffective against the enemy. The closest air support comes from F-80 Shooting Stars and F-84 Thunderjets, flying in from Japan. However, due to the long distance to Korean airspace, these aircraft can only remain over the battle zone for a brief 15 minutes before they must return. As the situation grows more dire, carriers are rushed toward Korea. Aboard the carriers, F9F Panthers are about to enter combat for the first time. Never before have carrier jets been launched into battle. Unlike their Air Force counterparts, Navy Panthers provide sustained cover for the desperate UN troops below. Flying as many as 4 missions a day, some nearly 2 hours long, Panther pilots work tirelessly around the clock to halt the North Korean advance. Back home, the U.S. military, severely depleted, scrambles to prepare for war. Carriers, long since mothballed, are reactivated, along with the planes that will fill their decks. Most of these are older, prop-driven aircraft, reflecting an American military still transitioning to the jet age. At the same time, both the Navy and Marines scour the country for pilots to fly them. Many World War II veterans, who had settled into civilian life, are called back to service. Some, like baseball legend Ted Williams, are thrown into Panther cockpits with only limited training.
He really wasn't well trained as a pilot. We trained him to fly weather in Korea in combat. But of course, we were always watching, being very careful. And Ted would have been an exceptionally good pilot had we had longer period to work with him.
Those recalled to duty have few jet hours and little recent flying experience. The rush to place older pilots into jet cockpits and into the grueling routine of multiple carrier landings often pushes safety and sound judgment to their limits. After accelerated carrier qualification on land strips, the pilots are quickly moved to the real thing.
414, into left turn, intercept final bearing, 305. Okay, check.
But over time, carrier launch procedures are perfected into a precise art. First, The plane handlers position the Panther on the catapult, with the section leader on the port side and the wingman on the starboard. Once aligned, the plane is revved up to full power, with the pilot gripping the stick with his right hand and the throttle with his left. A final salute signals the launch. Let the cat fly. As always during launch operations, a helicopter hovers nearby, ready to assist in the event a plane or pilot goes overboard. The Panther's tricycle landing gear causes it to sit in a tail-low position, and at full throttle, it has a tendency to scorch the caulking between the planks of the flight deck. The solution is retractable blast boards, which deflect the exhaust, allowing plane handlers to pass within 3 feet behind the aircraft. Upon launch, Panthers carry nearly 6,400 pounds of ordnance and fuel beneath their 9,300-pound frame. This includes up to 1,000 pounds of high-explosive bombs, 760 rounds of 20mm cannon shells, and over 920 gallons of fuel. With a range of nearly 1,200 miles, no part of the Korean peninsula is out of reach for these planes. With a stall speed of just 78 knots, Panthers deliver their payloads with remarkable precision. As they dive onto their targets, the Panthers deploy air brakes to smooth their descent, clearly visible on the fuselage underside beneath the canopy.
We were the heavy haulers out there, and that we're doing a lot of close air work up in front of the 1st Marine Division and in front of the Army divisions also. We did napalm. We used high-velocity aircraft rockets doing early morning road recce's way up where you'd go up in the, way up as we call it, way up in Indian country at that time, way up north, and drop down at first light in the morning and come down along the roads trying to pick up trucks or trains that hadn't gotten in yet. We used the airplane for a lot of purposes out there. We used it on I guess more close air support than anything else. We worked in very, very close in front of our own troops, and that's very exacting work.
To sustain this level of operations, a fleet of support ships shadows each carrier, supplying the ships and planes with the necessary resources. Each floating airbase requires replenishment about every 3 days. But the Panthers don't solely operate from carriers offshore. Marines, like John Glenn, are stationed at the numerous ground bases that spring up just behind the front lines. Conditions at these bases are primitive, but the Panther's ease of maintenance proves well suited to the harsh environment. The runways, made of grated steel mesh laid over bulldozed dirt, quickly become pocked with craters from the constant barrage of incoming aircraft. It's not unusual for pilots to burn through a set of tires after every mission, but with the arrival of General Douglas MacArthur, the harshness of the terrain and early battlefield defeats soon give way to a sense of waning hope. One of General MacArthur's first actions is to launch a strategic bombing campaign aimed at, in his own words, flattening every village, town, and city north of the 38th parallel. On June 30th, he issues orders declaring all of Korean airspace a free-fire zone. B-29s flying from Okinawa begin their 3-year mission to destroy the Communists' ability to move troops and supplies. However, American bomber crews are trained to operate in large formations, and soon there are far too few viable targets left in the North to justify such attacks. In August 1950, B-29s carry out the largest carpet bombing raid since Operation Cobra in Normandy, dropping over 3,200 500-pound bombs across a 3-by-7-mile area where a large North Korean troop concentration is believed to be. Intelligence photos later reveal that there were no enemy troops present. In one instance, a B-29 chases a lone North Korean soldier on a motorcycle down a road until its bombs catch up with him. As early as 1942, air warfare strategist Alexander Seversky wrote, "Total war from the air against an undeveloped country is nigh futile." It is one of the strange paradoxes of modern warfare. The most advanced weaponry is often least effective against the most primitive civilizations. The Korean experience highlights a key lesson. In the end, formation bombing results in over 200,000 North Korean civilian deaths. Yet it has only a limited strategic effect on the battlefield. While the enemy's road network is effectively destroyed, the North Koreans' relentless ability to move supplies at night or over land allows them to continue fighting effectively throughout the conflict. However, on September 15, 1950, at Incheon Harbor, the tides of war shift dramatically. In one bold move, MacArthur orchestrates a landing behind the North Korean lines. Forced with the threat of encirclement, the North Koreans are forced to abandon their grip on the Pusan perimeter and retreat. UN casualties during the invasion are incredibly light, with only 22 killed. It becomes the greatest American victory of the war, sending the North Korean army reeling. The U.S. landings at Incheon represent MacArthur's shining moment. Haunted by the memories of the disaster at Anzio, many in Washington had been hesitant to take such a risk. But the victory is decisive, and MacArthur revels in the triumph. As UN forces liberate the areas around Seoul, they uncover horrifying evidence of the brutal nature of North Korean occupation. Thousands of UN prisoners of war have been found and executed. Many more South Korean civilians, deemed unsympathetic by their communist overlords, are murdered and buried in shallow mass graves. The South quickly reestablishes itself under the leadership of President Syngman Rhee. However, despite being freer than the North, South Korea is still autocratic, with Rhee himself acting as a dictator. As Seoul is retaken, thousands of citizens suspected of communist sympathies or simply in Rhee's way are rounded up for summary imprisonment and execution. The advance northward mirrors Patton's blitz through France, with enemy resistance collapsing before the relentless UN forces. Within a month, the 38th parallel is left behind and the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, falls. A massive airborne drop blocks the retreating remnants of Kim's army. When UN ground forces link up with these paratroopers, victory appears within reach. MacArthur, initially focused on destroying North Korea's ability to wage war, begins to entertain grander ambitions. The speed and ease of the victory tempt him, and many in Washington, to consider a unified Korea firmly aligned with the West. But as UN forces continue pressing northward, sporadic numbers of Chinese regulars are discovered among the prisoners, signaling the presence of a new, far more dangerous threat. Incredibly, the High Command dismisses the presence of Chinese troops as inconsequential. As the situation takes a sudden turn, Truman and MacArthur meet at Wake Island to discuss their strategy moving forward. When asked about the rumors of Chinese troops massing across the Yalu River, MacArthur reassures Truman that even if the Chinese do attack, American air power can easily destroy the bridges and forward Chinese bases crucial to a successful offensive. Truman directs his field commander not to push too far. Meanwhile, Panthers, armed with aerial cameras, play a significant role in gathering intelligence over both sides of the Yalu. These unarmed Panthers are typically accompanied by a fighter escort. As the Navy's first photo reconnaissance jets, they conduct countless missions over hostile territory to assess enemy troop concentrations. However, the photos they bring back are either misinterpreted or ignored. By the beginning of November 1950, the CIA estimates that nearly 40,000 Chinese troops are already in Korea. Even more remarkably, when presented with evidence showing another 700,000 massed just across the border, MacArthur's command pays little attention. After all, it's a peasant army, lacking in training and heavy weapons, that is seen as unlikely to pose a real threat. November 1st, 1950. In the early morning hours of November 1st, 250,000 Chinese troops surge across the Korean border. All along the front, UN forces are overwhelmed by the sheer mass of the assault. For America, the Chinese invasion is quickly framed as part of the larger struggle against world communism. But for the leaders in Beijing, there is no ideological complexity to the decision. The invasion is driven by security priorities that predate the birth of communism by a millennium. To this resurgent Asian power, the presence of a massive Western army positioned on the Manchurian border is simply unacceptable. Resistance crumbles before wave after wave of enemy infantry. At the United Nations, the South Korean representative is quick to condemn the attack.
I point my finger at these representatives of the Chinese Communist regime, and I ask, why do they come here with unclean hands? I ask again, why does this group come here with hands that drip with blood, the blood of the United Nations troops, the blood of the Korean people?
In Washington, leaders of the nation's 4 largest veterans group petition Truman to use the atomic bomb on North Korea, with some even advocating for large-scale bombing of select Chinese cities. Both options are seriously considered by the Joint's Chief of Staff. In response, Truman, in classic Cold War rhetoric, reaffirms the U.S. commitment to preventing any more dominoes from falling.
If aggression is successful in Korea, we can expect it to spread throughout Asia and Europe and to this hemisphere. We are fighting in Korea for our own national security and survival. We have committed ourselves to the cause of a just and peaceful world order through the United Nations. We stand by that commitment.
The American public, already on edge, fears that this could be the prelude to World War III. The Soviets, they fear, will certainly come to China's aid, further escalating the global conflict. In New York, thousands of civilians participate in civil defense drills, learning rescue and survival techniques in preparation for the aftermath of a nuclear strike. Back in Korea, the fear is far more tangible. As winter sets in, thousands of GIs and Marines retreat southward over land that had been secured only weeks before. Many others fall into captivity. MacArthur himself compiles a list of nuclear targets spanning from North Korea into China, stating that to execute this plan, he would need 26 nuclear warheads. Feeling politically constrained by the restrictions on bombing north of the Yalu River, MacArthur's frustration with Truman intensifies, leading to their publicized clash and MacArthur's dismissal less than 6 months later. Despite the continuing large-scale strategic bombing, the same issues persist. Tremendous destruction is inflicted, but the enemy's ability to move and supply troops is only marginally disrupted. Early on, many air raids targeting the road network do little to slow the enemy's advance. Instead, they take a heavy toll on friendly forces and the thousands of refugees fleeing the battle zones. The reason is straightforward. The Chinese army is primarily a lightly equipped peasant force, advancing almost entirely on foot and across the land. Most of their supplies are moved at night or by thousands of porters trudging through the countryside. Adding to the challenge, intelligence officers accustomed to American divisions consuming 600 tons of supplies a day overestimate the Chinese need. In reality, Chinese divisions operate on just 50 tons per day. Standing just offshore, the carriers offer the real means of confronting this kind of enemy. They move in racetrack patterns a few miles offshore, launching ground attack aircraft in a continuous cycle of strikes. Throughout the war, none prove more effective than the Grumman Panther. For the first 6 months of the conflict, American air superiority remains unchallenged. However, in November 1950, another shockwave reverberates across the Western world, the arrival of a new aircraft, one for which the Panther is no match. When the MiG-15 jet fighters first appear in the skies over Korea, they reveal a technological superiority that many had not anticipated from the communist world. The initial development of 50 MiGs quickly expands to 450, flown mainly by Chinese and Soviet pilots operating from safe zones behind the Yalu River. By the end of the war, this number nearly doubles. In response, the U.S. Air Force deploys the F-86 Sabre just a month later. Despite chronic shortages, which prevent more than 150 Sabres from being stationed in Korea at any one time, the balance of air superiority quickly shifts.
After I'd finished my Marine missions flying the F-9s, they had one position they kept for one spot in each Air Force squadron that they kept for a Marine pilot, because the Marines had worked out an arrangement. They wanted to get some of our pilots some air-to-air experience. It was great. It was really a different kind of flying that I've been doing in the Panther, down doing close air support and down trying to dig them out down close to the ground. And this, of course, was flying up 40,000 feet.
Tiger Lead, Tiger 2 here. I got a couple of feet out there. One ground and two.
You didn't stand off like people do today and shoot a missile and it goes out and does your work for you. What you had to get in. You maneuvered him. You went out, you outflew the guy or outmaneuvered him, and you had to get him behind here, 500 to 1,000 feet back, and hose him, we'd say, with these 50 caliber. And so it was really old World War II type dogfighting, except you're doing it in jets. And so you're going, you have closing speeds, 500-600 miles an hour on planes going the opposite direction. You're closing maybe 800 to 1,000 miles an hour. And you'd see planes and you'd get into them, and all at once, bang, there you are, you and the guy you're with. And the rest of the air war has gone someplace. Oh, can't even see anybody else in sight.
In the following years, U.S. pilots demonstrate absolute superiority over their MiG counterparts. Though the Russian plane has superior climb rates and turning capability, by the end of the war, the U.S. Air Force boasts an impressive Sabre-to-MiG kill ratio of over 10 to 1. However, the dramatic aerial dogfights, often fought at altitudes of 40,000 feet, represent only a small part of the larger picture. The real battle rages on the ground, where tensions escalate dramatically, particularly between dusk and dawn. It is during these nightmare hours that the Chinese forces are most likely to mount their attacks, adding a new layer of danger and uncertainty to the conflict. The Grumman Panther, originally designed as a night fighter, provides well-suited for operations after dark, despite its eventual role being overtaken by other aircraft.
We used to go up with 2 planes and keep them over the front lines, being controlled with a special type Marine Corps ground radar. And we would, they would give a signal to drop, say, 25, 30,000 feet. Those were enjoyable flights, from my point of view, because there were very few other people up there in the black of night, because they didn't have a very fine control system. So we were all on our own, and of course with an airplane like that you had the ultimate and trust in, it was enjoyable flying that bird at night.
The difficulty of returning to a carrier in the vast pitch-black expanse of the ocean is a daunting one, something like finding a postage stamp in a dark room. And once a pilot locates their carrier, landing it becomes its own complex challenge.
Starboard cross clear. All right, Roger, 112 with a ball, 35, Demon. Roger, you're looking pretty good right now. You're selling, a little bit of power, and you're going low. Let's get up on the meatball, you're low. 505 at 800, say you can I go down to 600. Check your lineup, hold it up, power, power. Check your lineup, hold it up, power, power, power.
Winter conditions off the coast of the Korean peninsula are unforgiving. Storms in the Sea of Japan are fierce and unpredictable, often forcing carriers to navigate around these vicious weather systems. During these conditions, flight operations become nearly impossible, and the prospect of ditching at sea is an unthinkable nightmare for the pilots. But the real struggle is for the GIs and Marines fighting on the ground. Faced with severe casualties, the Marines refuse to leave their fallen comrades behind. Even when cut off and surrounded, they continue to look at the skies for air support and resupply, determined to hold their ground and stall the relentless Chinese advance. Their perseverance under such harrowing circumstances becomes a testament to their resolve, and despite the overwhelming odds, they manage to slow the tide of the Chinese offensive. In the realm of close air support, Marine and Navy pilots consistently outpace their Air Force counterparts, benefiting from a highly effective organic support system developed over years of cooperation, dating back to the island-hopping campaigns of World War II. Many Army commanders openly express a preference for Navy or Marine air support, citing their more integrated approach to ground operations. Back home, the rebuilding of the U.S. military continues in earnest, with priorities shifted in response to the ongoing conflict. In 1952, the first of many new Essex-class carriers is commissioned. These vessels become the cornerstone of the new Navy, marking the resurgence of naval aviation power. The USS Forrestal, the first of its kind, leads the way, symbolizing a new era in naval warfare and vindicating the legacy of the Essex-class carrier program. Meanwhile, the Navy works to update its fleet of aircraft. The Grumman Panther, still in service, is upgraded to meet the needs of modern warfare, but it is quickly eclipsed by a more advanced aircraft, the Grumman Cougar. The Cougar is essentially a larger, more powerful version of the Panther, featuring a 40% larger swept wing and a top speed nearly 100 miles per hour, faster than its predecessor. This new aircraft reflects the Navy's push to keep pace with the rapidly advancing technological landscape of the Korean War and beyond, as the need for faster, more capable fighters becomes ever more pressing. The Grumman Panther, originally conceived in an era when naval aviation seemed to be on the decline, plays a pivotal role in the Korean War, helping to revitalize carrier-based air power at a time when it was desperately needed.
On December 17, 1950, while patrolling Korean airspace, a United States Air Force F-86 Sabre spotted the distinct silhouette of a Model 15 MiG below. The Sabre's pilot descended rapidly towards the target and maneuvered behind the Soviet-built aircraft. The MiG swerved to evade the American pilot's sights, momentarily appearing as if it were the Predator. However, it took only a few minutes for the American pilot to position himself for this shot, and within seconds, the struggle for air superiority over Korea, with the prestige of two opposing philosophies at stake, had begun. The history of jet-powered fighters actually dates back to before the Second World War. The first Allied jet fighter to enter service was the British Gloucester Meteor. Utilizing two centrifugal flow engines, the Meteor increased fighter speeds from the previous maximum of 400 miles per hour to around 500 miles per hour. These Meteors were stationed in Europe just before the end of the Second World War. They garnered significant interest from American airmen, as the United States Air Force didn't have an equivalent jet fighter in service at that time. In fact, the Meteor saw very little combat, primarily being kept in England to prevent the new technology from falling into enemy hands. However, it proved vitally useful for shooting down the V-1 weapons fired against Britain, a role where its high speed was a significant advantage. The British fear of the Meteor falling into German hands was somewhat paradoxical, as Germany was at least a year ahead in jet design and had flown jet-powered aircraft before the war. Here, a young German pilot received some last-minute advice before his first jet flight. Undoubtedly, the Luftwaffe's most impressive success was the Messerschmitt 262. This excellent aircraft, powered by two axial flow jet engines, was actually faster than the Meteor. Additionally, it featured a successful aerodynamic shape, and later models were designed to utilize a swept wing philosophy that German engineers were developing at the time. Over 1,500 Messerschmitt 262s were built, but on Hitler's insistence, many were designated for a bomber role, a function for which the Swallow, as it was known, was not ideally suited. Eventually, and initially unofficially, the German High Command permitted the 262 to be used as a fighter. In the short time it served in this capacity, the 262's remarkable speed wreaked havoc among Allied bombers. Unfortunately for the Germans, the 262 came just too late to save the Third Reich, but it did give the Allies another insight as to the possibilities of jet development. Focusing more on improving piston engine design, America didn't begin developing jet technology until 1942. Had the war continued, the excellent Lockheed Shooting Star would have been its first combat jet. This is a photo reconnaissance version, but the basic fighter, which saw service for many years, was essentially the same. The Republic Thunderjet offered further improvements, with a slender, streamlined fuselage and more powerful jet engines. However, both the P-80 and the P-84 used a straight wing design that wasn't significantly different from the shapes employed during World War II. The North American Aviation Company initially adopted a conventional straight-wing layout for its first jet. However, they gained access to data on German swept-wing technology immediately after the war, leading them to modify the wing and tailplane positions into a swept-back format. The P-86 Sabre, as it became known, ultimately incorporated many other advanced features, such as the all-moving tailplane, automatic slats on the wing, and powered air brakes. Most importantly, its swept surfaces reduced air resistance, allowing for higher speeds. At the heart of the P-86 was a General Electric J47 jet engine, which utilized the axial flow principle, similar to that used in the earlier German Me-262, but now more sophisticated and refined. The jet concept operated on the principle of air being drawn in through the nose intake of the aircraft, then passing into an axial flow compressor area where the air is progressively compressed through 12 different stages. It's then forced into the combustion chambers where atomized fuel is injected and ignited. The resulting combustion and expansion of exhaust gases provide the necessary thrust and also drive the compressor, allowing the cycle to continue. The thrust produced by this jet engine technology was something that ground crew also had to adapt to. No-go areas were declared in front of the engine intake to prevent personnel from being sucked in, and behind the jet because of the phenomenal blast. One problem all jet engines had compared to piston aircraft was their vast fuel consumption. In the confined space of a fighter's fuselage, every square inch of available space was dedicated to fuel storage. The Sabre, like many other fighters, also employed drop tanks to provide extra kerosene. Most Sabres that went into production were equipped with 6 50mm machine guns as standard armament, mounted on each side of the heavily armoured pilot's position. Mainly due to the advantages of the swept wing at high speed, the Sabre went into production on October 16, 1947, with an initial order of 33 F-86A and 190 F-86B aircraft, which were later reclassified as F-86As. From the moment a pilot pushed the external switch to operate the powered canopy, they were stepping into a new world. Once inside, the pilot would first check the ejector seat locking pins, which couldn't be removed until shortly before taxiing to prevent accidental firing while the plane was still on the ground. They would then take stock of the staggering array of controls and instrumentation integral to the new technology. Managing a Sabre was far more complex than the stick and rudder techniques required of earlier planes. Here, 5,200 pounds of thrust had to be controlled and directed to propel what was at the time the world's fastest fighter.
George Tower, this is Air Force Force 184 requesting taxi clearance. Over.
Air Force 184, this is George Tower. Traffic southwest, cleared to runway 21 right.
One difference between jet-powered and piston engines is that jet engines take some time to build up the necessary thrust to get the aircraft off the ground. This was particularly true for heavier jet bombers, but even fighters needed to build up thrust before takeoff. If you look carefully at this shot, you can see the automatic leading edge flaps open, providing the pilot with more control at low speeds. In every respect, the Sabre was an aircraft for fighter pilots, and its nimbleness and agility were to prove invaluable in the years to come. During this period, the Air Force replaced the designation P for pursuit with the more fitting F for fighter, renaming the Sabre the F-86. Throughout the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Air Force showcased the Sabre's performance in numerous public displays. These demonstrations often featured up to 80 aircraft flying in intricate formations, showcasing their aerial skills. The breaking of the sound barrier was still a novelty, and although by then it was a routine for the pilots, at these airshows it was a highlight of the day for the crowds. Public confidence in American air power became crucial in 1949 when the Soviets demonstrated a formidable capability. They had replicated the American B-29 long-range bombers, capable of reaching the US on one-way missions. Moreover, they successfully detonated an atomic bomb, ending America's nuclear monopoly. This, alongside deteriorating US-Soviet relations, sparked significant concern. To counter potential Russian threats, production of the Sabre was ramped up, and an all-weather variant was developed, the F-86D Sabre Dog. This aircraft featured a sophisticated radar scanner mounted over the nose to detect enemy bombers in all-weather conditions, including at night. It also carried a rack of unguided rockets in the fuselage, deemed more effective for engaging attacking Russian bombers. When conflict erupted, it unfolded in a distant land. North Korean troops invaded South Korea, prompting the United Nations to intervene, and US B-29s were swiftly deployed to the region to target northern factories and communications. Despite not being ideally suited for this role, the B-29s effectively carried out their missions, securing US dominance of the skies over Korea. However, on November 1, 1950, American pilots were surprised to encounter the first Russian-built MiG-15s. These aircraft represented a significant technological leap beyond what the Soviets were previously believed to possess. Even with their defensive armament, B-29s stood little chance against these advanced Soviet fighters. In response to this new threat, the Pentagon ordered F-86s to be deployed to Korea, marking the beginning of the intense MiG versus Sabre aerial combat.
The first 4 flights into the area will stay below the contrails and keep a close watch on the fighter bombers. The last 2 flights will go above the contrails and check very closely for any MiG aircraft that might come in above the cons. Now, if you see MiGs up there today, call them out. Give their altitude, direction, and geographical location on the map. And call it out and then get off the radio. Now remember, once you look around, keep your speed up, and if you do get a bounce, cut him off, and drive in range. When you get in range, shoot, and when you shoot, shoot to kill. Anybody got any questions? Okay, let's go again.
Typically, Sabre forces operated in groups of 4 aircraft.
Tiger lead, Tiger 2 here. I got a couple bogeys out there with 1 coming around at 2 level. Roger, boy, I got up. You got him? All right, boy, that's a good deal. Winder, we got 4 of them coming in here on us at 7 o'clock. Hang on. Tiger lead, we got 2 down here walls at 3 o'clock position. I haven't done it, go ahead, take it, and I'll cover you. All right, I'm going in now. Okay, you're clear. Go ahead, go ahead. Tiger, I'm clear. We're going to start firing now. You're still clear. All right, look at him shift off. Okay, he's down, boy. You got him too.
By 1952, American pilots had engaged MiG-15s in numerous successful sorties. Similar to the dynamics of the Second World War, a group of elite aces emerged, men who demonstrated exceptional skill and determination in combat with their fighters. One of these American aces was Colonel Gabreski. Gabreski arrived in Korea already decorated as an ace, having flown Thunderbolts during World War II, but he further cemented his reputation as a MiG killer. The skill and experience of American pilots were crucial, considering that the MiG-15 itself was a formidable aircraft. While MiG kills outnumbered Sabre losses, the MiG-15 was undeniably a brilliant aircraft and, in several aspects, superior to the Sabre. Due to the MiG-15's impressive performance, the Air Force was eager to acquire one to study its design and capabilities, and in the later stages of the conflict, dropped leaflets over enemy territory offering enemy pilots $100,000 if they defected with their plane to the south. One pilot, Lieutenant Rowe, accepted the offer, and it must have been a surprising sight for the ground crew at Kimpo on September 21, 1953, when a MiG-15 landed. The aircraft was soon in the hands of American pilots, eager to fly and evaluate the MiG for themselves. One of the standout features of the MiG-15 was its armament, a combination of one 37mm and two 23mm cannon mounted in a compact, removable unit. This setup allowed for quick replacement by ground crew, enabling rapid turnaround times for the aircraft. The borrowed MiG, equipped with ammunition, provided an opportunity to test its firepower. Aircraft equipped with heavy cannon typically have a slower rate of fire compared to the 6 machine guns on the Sabre, but they deliver significantly greater hitting power. The MiG's armament prompted the US to develop a configuration for the Sabre, featuring 4 20mm cannon, replacing the original 6 50mm machine guns. Despite arriving late in the Korean conflict, the cannon-equipped Sabre achieved several MiG kills. However, for most of the campaign, it was the Sabre's machine guns, known for their high rate of fire, that brought down the majority of the MiGs. Pilots were trained to approach the enemy not directly from behind, but slightly from the side, as this angle presented a larger fuselage surface to target. Despite the Sabre's superior design and firepower, the F-86s faced formidable challenges. Nevertheless, the original Sabre design's excellence and its robust airframe proved crucial. Many aircraft returned home with significant damage, yet were still airworthy, a testament to the Sabre's durability and the skill of its pilots. The Sabre's heavy armor for pilots played a crucial role in saving many lives during the Korean conflict. As the Korean conflict progressed, American aces were redeployed to train new pilots in combat techniques specific to the F-86. This approach, where experienced pilots passed on their skills to younger aviators, was a pivotal part of the American strategy that ultimately prevailed in the Korean air conflict. Given the MiG-15's comparable overall capability to the Sabre, the skill of the pilots was often the deciding factor in engagements. Had the MiG been in the hands of better trained pilots, the outcome of the conflict might have been very different. It was the greater competence and better training of the American pilots with their consequent greater skill that was the real margin between the two planes. Preparing for flight was a complex and weighty process for the pilot. They would have to don a heavy flight suit along with a lined vest and carry the obligatory .45 automatic. Additionally, they had to don a Mae West life preserver, an essential parachute, and a survival kit containing various items from a rubber raft to a homing beacon. By the time they settled into the Sabre cockpit, complete with helmet and oxygen mask, they likely felt deeply integrated with the aircraft. This connection between pilot and machine was not just symbolic, but also essential to the effectiveness of US fighters during the Korean campaign. The Sabre's design allowed for significant versatility in its role. Originally an interceptor, it could also be configured to carry air-to-ground rockets or bombs when necessary. The Sabre's design versatility made it well suited for roles beyond interception. Although it was seldom used in interdiction missions during the Korean War, other countries in different theaters employed the F-86 very effectively as a ground attack aircraft. In the mid-1950s, just after the Korean conflict, the US developed air-to-air homing missiles like the innovative Sidewinder. These missiles were integrated onto Sabres to enhance their interception capabilities. In this scenario, a standard 5-inch unguided rocket is fired from one side of an F-86 to serve as a test target for the Sidewinder missile fired from the other side. The Sabre's production extended beyond the United States, with manufacturing in Canada and Australia and assembly in Italy and Japan. However, one of the most intriguing developments occurred in Australia. The Royal Australian Air Force sought an enhanced version of the Sabre, leading to a comprehensive redesign by the Commonwealth Aircraft Factory. They strengthened and lengthened the fuselage to accommodate the Avon engine, also used in their Canberra bombers. This engine provided 50% more thrust than the early Sabre engines, although integrating it posed significant challenges. The Australian Sabre emerged as the most powerful variant produced. While its maximum speed wasn't significantly higher than the American version, it boasted superior acceleration and lifting capabilities. The large letter P on the side of this plane is the standard Commonwealth symbol for prototype, similar to the Y used by American aircraft. Australia produced 112 Avon-powered Sabres, some of which were transferred to the Indonesian Air Force as they were replaced by the French Mirage. By the early 1960s, the Sabre, still in service with many nations, was beginning to show its age. While the addition of Sidewinder missiles bolstered its effectiveness as an interceptor, no aircraft, even the renowned F-86, could remain in the front line indefinitely. Moreover, North American aviation had introduced a successor in the form of the F-100 Super Sabre. Larger and capable of speeds up to 1,000 miles per hour, the F-100 Super Sabre marked the beginning of the famed Century series of American fighter aircraft. In the early 1960s, the Sabres were gradually phased out and reassigned to roles within the Home Guard. Here, a pilot inspects an F-86 Sabre that has been relegated to Home Guard duties. Once again, the synergy between pilot and aircraft proves to be highly effective, even in this new capacity. The skills and experience of a combat veteran are invaluable to the nation, and so is the enduring value of the investment in a well-built and long-serving aircraft like the F-86 Sabre. Even after its retirement from frontline service, the Sabre continued to serve a vital role in the hands of skilled and dedicated aircrew within the Home Guard, providing a robust second line of defense. In the United States, the F-86 remained operational with National Guard squadrons well into the 1970s, and it continues to be flown by air forces in various countries around the world. The design, originating in the 1940s, has proven exceptionally durable, not only because of the Sabre's solid construction, but also because it consistently fulfilled its mission requirements.